Dollar. Dirt and money, no soul. Had to go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack of flip for my foes. Dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and don't neglect me. Just let me know if you need me. Dollar. Let me watch out for my partners. Keep my money long, get my team strong. Let me run away from my promise.
Yo, what's good, original crew, man? We're back on the channel. Hey, we got a ballin', cause we fly high. No lie, you know is. Today's video, if there wasn't footage, you wouldn't know this place existed. Pineapples.
What was that?
Huh? You said what?
Nothing.
Oh, you said what I said?
I said, what was that?
I don't even know. Fruit. Hey, make sure you check out the links in the description box.
Down below.
You already know where to go. If you want to first support, you got to do it. Check out down below. Also, if you enjoyed today's video,
like it with a thumbs up.
Let's get into it. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Join the family, join the fun that we do have over here on a daily. We need y'all to run us up, man. We on the road to 300K. Can't get there without y'all, man.
Facts.
Y'all know what it is. Let's go.
Today, I'm going to tell you 3 stories about places you can't go and people who went there anyways. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please sneak into the like button's house and replace the stuffing in their pillow with cement. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories. Around 4:45 p.m. on February 11th, 1995, a 50-year-old man named Eric Tollett sat in his office in the furniture factory that he owned in Northumberland, which is a pretty rural country in northern England. From inside his office, all Eric could hear outside was the thumping of the rain on the roof. There was this low-pressure system in the area, which was causing a really intense thunderstorm. In fact, the storm was so bad that Eric had actually decided to close the factory for the day so all his employees could stay home during the storm. And Eric was glad that he could actually afford to give his employees a day off like this, because it had not always been that way. He had bought this factory 16 years earlier, and it had taken all of his savings and scrapping together all of his money to actually make the investment. And then after he purchased the factory, it required a huge renovation to make it ready to be a furniture factory that he could actually sell products out of. But now, after 16 years of hard work, his business was quite successful. And so a day like today was no big deal. He wasn't all that concerned about the lost profits that day. Instead, he was just using the time to catch up on some admin work and also spend some time with his family. Eric's girlfriend, whose name was Leslie, was at the factory with him, hanging out in the office as well. And also Eric's brother, whose name was Donald, had taken Leslie's 8-year-old son over to the factory's attached garage to go play. But as Eric, shuffled through his paperwork and did a few things, and Leslie was over at the window looking outside, suddenly the door to his office swung open, and it was Leslie's 8-year-old son who came barging in. There's no Donald, so Eric's brother's not with him, and the son, he just looked totally panicked. And he immediately said, before Eric or Leslie could ask any questions, that Donald had collapsed over in the attached garage. Now, initially, Eric didn't really know what to make of this, but his first thought was, his brother Donald was 60 and he did have some health issues. And just hearing this kid say that Donald had collapsed, it signaled to Eric, like, oh my goodness, did Donald have a heart attack? Or he was also thinking, this kid's only 8 years old. Is he overreacting? Is there actually something totally benign happening? Whatever it was, Eric knew immediately that it was time to drop everything and run over there and check on Donald. And so that's what he did. He and Leslie put their stuff down. They ran with the 8-year-old, through all the way to this attached garage, which, in virtue of it being attached, they never actually went outside into the storm. They just ran straight to this garage. And sure enough, when they got there, there was Donald laying on the ground. And so before Eric ran over to his brother to assess him to see what was going on, he just stopped right in the doorway and turned to Leslie and her son, and he told them, go back to my office and call 911. I'll be in there as soon as I can. And so they turned, they left, and then Eric, he turned back around, rushed into the garage, and knelt down next to Donald. And right away, he could tell that his brother was not breathing. And as he's sort of feeling around for some sign of life, suddenly Eric began to feel this incredible tightness in his chest. And then before he knew it, he had blacked out and collapsed right next to his brother. So before Eric purchased this factory 16 years earlier, it had been a factory, but it was not a furniture factory. It was a coal factory. And in virtue of that, there was a coal mine that literally was attached to the structure. Basically, the coal would come up out of the mine and be processed inside of this, big warehouse. Now, when Eric bought it, he knew that there was this coal mine and there was this entrance to the coal mine connected to the structure. But the coal mine was not in use. The entrance to the coal mine had been completely boarded up, and it really played no role whatsoever. However, over the decade and a half that he owned this property and didn't think at all about that coal mine, well, over that time, this poisonous gas called choke damp began to develop inside the mine. And then on the day that, Eric and Donald collapsed inside the garage, well, it was because the low pressure storm outside caused those poisonous gases to rise up and seep out of the boarded up entrance. And those poisonous choke damp gases built up inside of that attached garage, basically making that entire room lethal to anybody inside of there. And so unfortunately, Donald would die from poisoning. Eric, when he passed out, he nearly died, but he was pulled out in time and ultimately woke up in the hospital, and he would survive.
How traumatizing it is.
Facts.
Cause then you thinking in your head like, damn, only if I had got there quicker or had a.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, he tried. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But also, y'all was unaware of the conditions and the toxic gas that was there. So you can't... Because I know a lot of people have survivor's guilt in a situation like this. It's like, I was able to survive only if I was moved faster or this or this. Yeah. So in your mind, you're thinking of every scenario there is under the sun.
Could have or should have done.
Yeah. And it's like, you didn't know either. So...
Yeah.
Like, you did what you could have done.
Rest in peace to Donald.
Facts, man.
At 10 a.m. on September 10th, 2022, a 68-year-old woman named Diana Stewart stood on the deck of a small boat in the Pacific Ocean, less than a mile off the eastern coast of New Zealand. She looked out at the perfectly calm, light blue water, and she saw this albatross bird flying across the sky, so she lifted up her camera and took a picture. Diana was a wildlife photographer, and she was also a member of the Nature Photography Society of New Zealand. And she, along with 9 other members of this society, had chartered this boat for a special birdwatching and photography trip. And so far, the trip had lived up to the hype. They'd spent 2 hours sailing around the water, photographing all these beautiful and rare birds and other wildlife, and they'd even been lucky enough to see a couple of whales. And so this had been really a fantastic trip. Now, at this point, the group had basically finished up their trip, and they were making their way back towards shore. And so as they were going, Diana was keeping her eye out for any last-minute picture opportunities. And as she was looking around, looking for birds, she noticed something in the water. There was something huge moving sort of near the boat. It actually looked like it was moving towards the boat, sort of at an angle. And at first, she couldn't really tell what it was, but then suddenly it came into focus that it was an enormous whale. This huge whale is gonna swim basically right under the boat. And so Diana, she pulled out her camera to take a photo, but then the worst thing possible happened. This whale, sure enough, came towards the boat, but it didn't go under the boat. It rammed the side of the boat. And before Diana could do anything, suddenly the boat was lurching onto its side, and she and the rest of the crew were thrown off the boat into the frigid water. And the second she hit the freezing cold water, Her life jacket, which she was wearing, it automatically inflated. It was one of those auto-inflate life jackets. It inflates and she's sort of disoriented. The water was so shockingly cold. I mean, this is a completely unbelievable situation to find yourself in. But, as she surfaced and she tried to get her bearings, she realized it was pitch black everywhere she looked, and it was so loud. She could barely hear anything but the sound of the engine of the boat. And that's when she realized, as she's putting her hands up, that the boat must have capsized and landed on top of her. But there's this little bit of air. She's basically in an air pocket. But she can't hear anything. She just hears the sound of this engine and it's deafening. And so she began calling out for help, and she tried to kind of maneuver out from underneath, this curved underside of the boat that created this pocket, but she couldn't find her way out. And this life jacket she had on was fully inflated. She couldn't, deflate it. And because of her buoyancy, she couldn't swim down below and get out from under this boat. And so she's sort of trapped underneath this boat. It's freezing cold. The water could easily give you hypothermia in less than 30 minutes. It's total chaos. It's loud because of the engine. And so Diana's trying not to panic. And as she's sort of looking around, fumbling in the dark, gasping for air, she realized there were other people also trapped underneath. And so she's grabbing at them and trying to talk to them, and they're all panicked. She has no idea, what their state is. Are they hurt? She doesn't know. And so basically her only option at this point was just to bang on the underside of this boat, just trying to get anybody's attention outside, out from underneath where they were, to know that they were trapped under here. They needed help. And in fact, when she began knocking, there were people outside the boat, basically, who had been thrown off the boat. Everybody had been thrown off the boat. There was 11 people. 6 people were not trapped under the boat. 5, including Diana, were trapped underneath. And so as Diana is pounding the underside of the boat, the skipper of the boat, a guy named Mark, he was one of the 6 who were outside, and he clearly heard the knocking sound. And so he's obviously in a bad situation too, same as everybody else in the water. But he was in a markedly better situation because he's not trapped under this boat. And so he quickly understood that, okay, he needs to gather the 6 people he's with, kind of make sure they're okay, and then figure out how they're gonna get these people trapped under the boat out. And so his first instinct was just to bang back on the side of the boat, to let them know, hey, we hear you. But again, you gotta picture the scene. They are suddenly in the water because a whale flipped their boat. They have no idea if this boat's gonna sink any second here. The engine is currently running, so it's super loud. The water is freezing cold. They're out in the middle of the ocean. Like, this is a true life or death situation here. But Mark, he does his best to stay calm. He's hitting the boat back to let the folks know down underneath the boat that they're okay. We'll get you out of there. But underneath, Diana and the others, they're starting to panic. It's hard to breathe down there. I mean, there's really not much air. The water's choppy because they're moving around. And so they're gulping down water as they're doing their best to survive down there. But they just keep hitting the boat back, saying, come on, you got to get us out of here. But periodically, they'd still try to force themselves out from underneath. But again, their life jacket just made it impossible. Like, they didn't have a way out unless they ditched their life jacket. But then that's another problem. Like, are you really prepared to ditch your life jacket? You don't know if there's obstacles when you swim out from under. You don't know if you're even strong enough to make the swim. What happens if you get stuck down below? Like, there's all these factors that sort of forced the group under the boat to do nothing and wait and just bang the underside of the boat. And so Mark, out on the outside with his group of 6 people, including himself, they actually climbed on top of the flipped upside down boat. The boat was big enough that he knew their extra weight would not cause it to sink any further or create a worse problem for those under the water. He just knew he had to get those people out of the water to avoid hypothermia. And then once they were all up there, Mark found one of the people he was with, their cell phone, despite being submerged, was still working. And so Mark took the phone, he called authorities and said, you gotta send somebody out here right now. We have people trapped in the water. We need your help. Authorities said they would be out there as soon as possible. And sure enough, authorities were able to get out to the boat fairly quickly. And they were able to get Mark and the 5 others that were trapped on top of the capsized vessel to safety. And then divers were sent into the water and they went underneath the boat. And sure enough, the 5 others, Diana included, they were all still there. But unfortunately, all 5 were deceased. However, those 5 didn't die from hypothermia.
Oh.
They didn't die from drowning. When the boat was actually hit by the whale and capsized, it caused some of the gasoline lines to rupture. And so there was this leak in the gasoline lines. And when the boat was upside down, that leak was basically pouring into the air pocket. The dark, freezing cold, loud, awful air pocket they were in was basically filling with toxic gasoline fumes. And ultimately, 17 minutes after capsizing, all 5 died from gasoline poisoning.
That's so sad.
And that's probably why they were banging so hard and so much, because they're inhaling this and they panicking.
Yeah.
It's not because
Rest in peace
damn.
to all 5 of them.
Yeah, it's just 4 or 5.
Yeah.
5. And they older too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sad.
That's a horrible way to go out too.
Facts.
Oh man, that's tragic, bro.
On Sunday, November 6th, 2022, a 21-year-old man named Yevgeny Titov walked out of his home in a small city called Zhigulovsk, which is in western Russia. Yevgeny got into his car, and then he drove about an hour and a half north to this parking lot where he parked, and then he got out and walked a few blocks to a nearby train station. When he got there, he asked the person behind the counter when the next train was going to St. Petersburg, and they told him there was one leaving soon. He bought a ticket, and then Yevgeny sat and he waited, and then eventually his train rolled through. He climbed on board, took his seat, and for the next 43 hours, because St. Petersburg was 1,000 miles away, Yevgeny just sat there, basically doing nothing for nearly 2 days. He didn't bring anything with him. He had his wallet. That was it. He just sat there, just waiting to get to St. Petersburg. When they got to St. Petersburg, late on the night of Tuesday, November 8th, Yevgeny, calm as can be, stood up, left the train, and then somehow, possibly by another train or by bus or on foot, or maybe somebody gave him a ride, we don't really know, but he traveled about 15 miles south of that train station to Pulkova Airport in St. Petersburg. But when he got to the airport, he didn't, board a plane like one would do at an airport. Instead, he found his way to this one very specific parking lot that was outside of the airport. Several hours later, in the early morning hours of Wednesday, November 9th, a random person was on their way through that same parking lot on the way to the airport when they started to hear something. It actually sounded like muffled screaming. And at first, they sort of chalked it up to, lots of people making their way to the airport. Maybe it's a kid, maybe it's, someone goofing around. Like, it didn't seem serious. But as they walked towards this open manhole cover, they realized that the screaming they were hearing was actually coming from inside of this hole in the ground. The screams were from Yevgeny, for reasons that we still do not fully understand. Yevgeny, after taking the manhole cover off, climbed down into this manhole, so he goes deep underground. And then when he reached the bottom of the manhole, which was, relatively wide all the way around, you could stand inside of it, there were these different offshoots of pipes that basically traveled underground. And Yevgeny got down and chose one of these pipes that was only a foot in diameter wide. It's like this pitch black, never-ending seeming tunnel. And head first, he began crawling in this tunnel. And he crawled nearly 40 feet before he finally just couldn't move any further. Keep in mind, every inch he was taking, he's basically wedging himself deeper and deeper into this pipe. It isn't like it was big and then got narrow. No, it's this narrow pipe that he forced himself through until he just could not move any farther. And it was at that point, in the wee hours of Wednesday, November 9th, that Yevgeny began to scream. And that's when the person found him. And authorities would go down inside the manhole, and somehow or another, after many hours and all the specialized equipment, they actually would somewhat unbelievably pull Yevgeny out of the pipe, and he would survive. Yevgeny would have to actually be hospitalized because he sustained very severe skin damage from basically thrusting himself deeper and deeper into this rusty, awful pipe. He also sustained gas poisoning and hypothermia, but again, he did live. Following this ordeal, authorities would launch an investigation into what exactly happened here, because
Right.
there was no clear reason why Yevgeny would have traveled all this way to go
Just
into
to
this
go,
pipe.
right?
But when they spoke to Yevgeny after he made his recovery, after he was back to normal, he would just say he has absolutely no memory of doing any of it.
Wow. Wow. That's scary, bro.
That's crazy.
And I'm blessed that he survived.
That's what I'm
And
saying.
thank goodness the person even heard him screaming. They was
What
at
you said?
the right place, I guess at the right time. Cause what?
Cause what?
And luckily they didn't ignore it and be like, oh, I guess it's maybe some
True.
a lot of things. Cause that could have went totally different.
True that.
Wow.
That's a crazy story, bro.
Yeah. I hope he's doing
All
okay.
these stories is
Like
crazy.
mentally, I hope he's fine.
Yeah.
Especially, with him not even having any memory of like, or just don't really have answers as to why. But yeah, hopefully he's doing well.
But hey, man, y'all spam us up in the comments. Y'all let us know y'all thoughts about it for us in the comments down below. But until next time, y'all know how it go, man. I do go by the name DJ New Kid. This is
Cee Reacts
We are.
Kid and Cee.
We are.
Ain't no time to kick it, got a stack of flip for my foes. Dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and on the